Have you seen the new FNAF trailer?
Alright, I watched Five Nights at Freddy's 2, and I can proudly confirm that critics can go eat a chonky pile of bricks because the movie was not a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. FNAF 2 was most definitely peak. With what I'm trying to make is that the movie's terrible reception is more overkill than the amount of midterms university students get throughout the semester, because this was actually such a fun time in the theater. So
I don't know if you've taken a look at the reviews for this movie, but they are not good. As of Friday morning, 12% of the 59 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive, and that makes it one of the worst reviewed movies of the year. But having seen it for myself, I don't think it's that.
All I know is I was hearing them saying that this one was supposed to be bigger, bolder, more animatronic, scarier. They listened to the fans and they were going to make true on those promises. And well, I seen the movie. I sat down with Mr. Fazbear and Chica. And I'll say they actually did listen a little bit to
FNAF 2 was meant to lift the franchise higher than ever, yet the moment it hit theaters, the entire structure cracked. Fans who waited years walked out stunned. Critics shredded it within hours, and the box office sank so quickly, insiders called it a collapse no one predicted. What began as a celebration turned into a disaster that shook the entire horror community. While the studio scrambled behind closed doors, one name kept rising above the noise: Scott Cawthon. The creator who built FNAF from nothing stayed silent at first, watching as his world unraveled on screen. But silence doesn't last when your story is twisted into something you never approved. Tension had been brewing long before the premiere. Creative fights, ignored warnings, and major decisions made without the man who shaped the lore. When the box office numbers crashed and rumors claimed the franchise's future was in danger, those hidden disputes suddenly exploded. Scott stepped forward not as an observer, but as someone demanding answers. What followed stunned everyone. Reports surfaced that Scott confronted the film's creators directly, calling out the choices that reshaped his world and challenging the direction the studio pushed. And just as the chaos peaked, insiders whispered a final shockwave. FNAF 3 had been cancelled.
Am I the biggest Five Nights at Freddy's fan in the world? Nope. But, did I see the first film? Yes. Did I like it? No. But, I could understand why others did. So, I just saw the second film. Did I like it? Nope. But this time, I can't understand why others seem to like it.
But yeah, look at this. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is overall terrible. It's just nonstop of like these critics saying this movie stinks. It is the worst thing. Why did I waste my time? It goes on and on.
And unfortunately, I simply don't think that that's the movie that they delivered. It just kind of felt like an empty film. That there just wasn't much there at all on any level.
Before everything fell apart, FNAF 2 carried a level of hype most films never touch. Fans remembered how the first movie, despite mixed reactions, built trust. Trust that the sequel would finally deliver the depth and mystery they'd been waiting for. That belief pushed expectations far beyond what the studio could realistically meet. The trailer sent the excitement into overdrive. Every frame was paused and dissected across Reddit and YouTube as fans searched for clues about timelines, new animatronics, and hidden lore. Even tiny details became fuel for theories, convincing everyone this would be the chapter that finally connected everything. Producers fed that enthusiasm with hints and promises of a darker, more faithful continuation. Their words made fans believe the team truly understood Scott's vision. The anticipation became electric, spreading through the community like wildfire. But that same hype created the perfect trap. Expectations rose so high, the film needed near perfection to survive. What fans didn't know was that behind the scenes, the first cracks were already forming, cracks that would soon open into the collapse that changed everything.
It basically treats the main plot of the movie as a reveal for the third act. It just feels like we're wandering through subplots kind of aimlessly where so many things are happening, but also it feels like nothing is really happening because nothing is particularly meaningful.
Premiere night was supposed to confirm everything fans hoped for. The opening scenes carried the right tension, the atmosphere felt rich, and the animatronics looked strong enough to calm early nerves. For a brief moment, the audience believed the studio had delivered the sequel they'd promised. Then the shift began. Storylines drifted without purpose, characters acted with no emotional weight, and whole sections of lore were rewritten or ignored. The pacing collapsed so sharply that viewers felt lost rather than scared. What should have deepened the story instead left fans confused and frustrated. Reactions hit social media before the credits finished rolling. Fans didn't wait for critics, they recorded their shock in real time. Clips showed people leaving theaters shaking their heads. Comments piled in saying the movie felt empty, unfocused, and disconnected from the world Scott built. One phrase appeared again and again: "This isn't FNAF." It spread across platforms within hours. What started as disappointment quickly turned into a wave of disbelief as fans realized the sequel they'd waited years for had missed every mark that mattered. By morning, the numbers confirmed the disaster. Rotten Tomatoes scores plunged, audience reactions slid even lower, and the box office tanked so fast, industry insiders were stunned. What looked like a guaranteed hit became one of the sharpest drop-offs of the year. Critics tore into the film with reviews that spread across YouTube and entertainment sites. Thumbnails showing broken animatronics and angry captions filled the homepage. Even creators who usually defended the franchise released harsh breakdowns, capturing millions of views in a single day. Fans delivered the harshest blows. They posted side-by-side comparisons of the original lore with what the movie presented, pointing out contradictions and calling the film a hollow cash grab. Entire threads tore apart scenes that ignored years of story development, leaving the community feeling betrayed. As word spread, box office predictions didn't just fall, they collapsed. Insiders began whispering that the franchise's future was suddenly uncertain. A sequel expected to dominate the industry had instead become a warning sign of something much deeper going wrong behind the scenes. Once the backlash hit full force, early leaks began resurfacing, painting a clearer picture of what happened before release. Reports claimed Scott and the studio clashed months earlier over the direction of the film, with Scott pushing for a mystery-driven narrative true to the games. The studio had other plans. They wanted a louder, faster, flashier horror film designed to appeal to casual audiences. Insiders said key story elements were rewritten to fit a style Scott never approved, and moments tied deeply to the lore were stripped down to make room for spectacle. Fans had ignored those early warnings because they wanted to believe the sequel would honor the franchise's roots. But as more details leaked, the truth became impossible to overlook. Scott's influence had been reduced, and the film no longer reflected the world he built. These revelations shifted the tone of the backlash. This wasn't just about a bad movie, it was about a creator being pushed aside. And as fans processed that betrayal, tension grew between the community and the people who claimed to understand FNAF better than its own creator. For days, Scott stayed quiet while the internet imploded around FNAF 2. Fans demanded answers, critics attacked the film's choices, and the studio tried to contain the backlash. That silence only fueled speculation, with people wondering if Scott had stepped away or if something deeper was happening behind the scenes. Then everything shifted. His personal site suddenly went dark, replaced by a single line of text on a black screen. No explanation, just a message that spread instantly across Reddit and X. It felt like a warning from someone who had watched too much go wrong and refused to stay hidden any longer. Fans reacted immediately. They shared old clips of Scott discussing the lore, the characters, and the meaning behind his work. His brief message hit harder than any full statement. It showed he wasn't ignoring what happened. In that moment, the backlash took a new shape. This wasn't just a failed movie anymore. Scott had stepped into the conversation, and everyone waited to see what he would do next. Leaks soon revealed what Scott had kept private. Insiders confirmed he confronted the film's creators before release, pushing them to cut lore-breaking scenes and keep the emotional core intact. His warnings were clear, urgent, and rooted in years of building the story. The studio rejected those concerns. They wanted louder scares, faster pacing, and a style designed for mass appeal rather than true FNAF atmosphere. Reports described tense meetings where Scott defended his story while executives focused on trends and box office goals. One leak claimed he walked out saying, "This isn't FNAF anymore." That line spread across the fandom instantly. Fans finally understood why the movie felt disconnected. It had been shaped without its creator. The confrontation changed the entire conversation. This was no longer about disappointment. It was about a creator fighting to protect the heart of his world from people who didn't understand it. Once the leak spread, the community mobilized. Hashtags surged worldwide as fans rallied behind Scott and accused the studio of stripping away the story's soul. Art, edits, and tributes appeared everywhere, painting Scott as the guardian of the lore. Theory YouTubers added fuel to the fire. Their breakdowns exposed inconsistencies and rewrites, pulling millions of views and strengthening the movement. Fans shared clips of Scott's old interviews as proof he always protected the story's deeper meaning. Petitions circulated demanding a Scott cut or restoring his creative control. Everywhere you looked, the same message echoed: the fans trusted Scott. not the studio. What began as frustration turned into a unified uprising. This wasn't just about a disappointing sequel. It was about protecting a world that shaped an entire generation of horror fans. The studio finally responded after a week of chaos, releasing a polished message across their official accounts. It claimed they respected the creative legacy and stood by their team's vision, offering no apology and no mention of ignoring Scott's input. To fans, it read like a corporate shield, not an explanation. Within minutes, the post was buried under thousands of replies. Fans ratioed it across every platform, calling out the empty wording and posting Scott's cryptic quote in the comments. The message meant to calm the storm only intensified it, turning the backlash into something the studio could no longer contain. Behind closed doors, insiders reported panic. Marketing campaigns were paused, meetings stretched late into the night, and executives blamed each other for letting the situation escalate. The studio had expected a minor controversy, not a rebellion that dominated every corner of the internet. As the statement continued to implode publicly, Scott struck again with a single sentence on his verified account. No explanation, no follow-up. Just a cold line that hit harder than anything the studio had said. The entire conversation shifted instantly back to him. Days later, new leaks revealed the fallout was worse than anyone expected. Insiders claimed the studio had quietly pulled the plug on FNAF 3, shelving early concepts and freezing all development linked to the sequel. The box office disaster made the studio fearful of another misstep, and executives didn't want to risk a second public implosion. The rumor spread fast. Fans were stunned, not because the film failed, but because the studio chose retreat instead of repair. Threads exploded with frustration, arguing that canceling the next chapter proved the studio never understood the franchise's weight in the first place. At the same time, Scott's second message began circulating again, short, sharp, and impossible to ignore. It felt like a response not just to the movie, but to the entire direction Hollywood tried to force onto his creation. Fans started speculating that the cancellation wasn't the end, but a reset. As the dust settled, the question everyone asked changed. It wasn't, what happened to FNAF 2 anymore. It became, what will Scott do now that the studio has stepped back? FNAF 2's collapse wasn't just a box office disaster, it became a turning point that exposed the gap between corporate ambition and creative truth. The studio chased trends, rewrote lore, and pushed the franchise into a direction that broke everything fans loved. And in the end, they lost control of the very world they tried to reshape. Scott never fought with long statements or interviews. He used a few sharp lines that reminded fans why they trusted him from the beginning. The community rallied around him, rejecting the studio's vision and defending the heart of the franchise he built. Their loyalty turned a failed sequel into a message Hollywood couldn't ignore. Independent creators revived the spirit of FNAF with fan projects and tributes that felt more authentic than the film itself. The movement showed that passion can outlive any box office crash. Whether Scott chooses a reboot, a new game, or something entirely unexpected, one truth remains unshaken. They changed the movie, they broke the sequel, and they canceled the next chapter. But they couldn't take the story away from the man who created it.